Today we'll be discussing the roast of Tom Brady. Then we'll be discussing alkaline diets and Alex Guerrero. This is Doctor versus Comedian. I'm Dr. Asif Doja, and this is the Doctor of Laughs.
Not a real doctor, much like Alex Guerrero.
Ali Hassan. Every episode I pick a topic for Ali from comedy and entertainment, and I question him about it. Then Ali picks a topic from medicine and health and grills me on that topic. Today we'll be discussing the roast of Tom Brady. Now, Tom Brady has been linked to Alex Guerrero, who is a health practitioner, who advocates an alkaline diet. So in our second half, we'll discuss Guerrero, his healthcare business with Brady, and whether there's any evidence behind his claims.
Right on. Now, let me just say this. We are starting by talking about a roast. Roasts are not for everybody. There's one beauty in roasts. You know, recently Jerry Seinfeld joined the chorus of all the aging out of touch comedians. You can't say anything anymore. Watch a roast and you will see that not only can you say anything, it is broadcast live on Netflix to millions of people. Nobody has to worry about free speech. Yes, certain people can get canceled for certain things. If they're white men, they fail upwards. If they're other people, it lasts a little bit longer. Everything is fine. But roasts are meant to offend, but you roast the ones you love, is the mantra of Jeff Ross, who's sort of the Roastmaster General. If roasts are not for you, that is totally fine. It is a specific type of comedy. But I think the subject of Alex Guerrero and his many trials and tribulations, and it's not just alkaline diet, but there's many claims he's made that they range from suspect to fraudulent. However, if you want to talk about the proof is in the pudding, the athletes he works with are doing incredible. So we're going to discuss that. I think it's going to be a very interesting conversation. So feel free to pass the roast. If you're never going to watch the roast, but you have some interest, I think we're going to have an interesting conversation. If you haven't seen it yet, there will be spoilers.
Okay, Ali, let's get started with the roast of Tom Brady. As you mentioned in the opening, this was on Netflix recently. It was broadcast live on Netflix. As people may have heard, Netflix is trying to get more into the live broadcasting. And part of that is to attract more viewers. So they want to get into live events like this, live sports. It's also for advertising, right? Because then they can sell live advertising. And live advertising obviously generates revenue because you can guarantee people are watching. That's why things like NFL games, they can sell advertising for such high prices. So it's moving into that. It was 3 hours in length, pretty long, certainly the longest comedy thing I've watched in a very long time. Let's start off with this. Ali, do you think Tom Brady was a good candidate for a roast? Why or why not?
The first thing is the roastee or the roasted must be willing to be roasted. So the willingness was there. But they kept telling him, you're so stupid. Why would you want this? But the willingness was there. Number two, you have to be somebody that people have strong opinions about. You have to be out there in the public eye. You can't be kind of like a pseudo celebrity to make this work. So obviously that's there. And number three, you have to be willing to this is not just willing to take a joke. This is willing to take significant abuse for an extended period of time. And Tom Brady, if you know anything about football, which I know you don't, Asif, but sitting in that pocket as a quarterback, particularly a guy who has played as long as he has, until he was 42, he was playing football. More than half his life has been dedicated to football, playing a quarterback position. By the way, he was going to be this is crazy. He was going to be drafted by the Expos as a baseball catcher. That arm was going to be used. Yeah, that was also, I mean, this guy could have done anything in life. Just one of the most elite athletes the world has ever seen. Yeah, you take a lot of abuse, physical, but also mental. Like it weighs on you and people are trying to get in your head. They're trying to get any advantage. He's won 7 Super Bowls. He's about to be in the Hall of Fame, but many people will say he should have already been in the Hall of Fame. In June this year, he's going to be inducted into the Hall of Fame. Well deserved. So all those things together for me suggest, yeah, great candidate for a roast.
Okay, well, he gets your approval, and of course, the approval of the millions of people. It's been a big hit on Netflix. Millions of
There you
people
go.
watch it live, and of course, lots of people watching it after the fact. We'll talk a bit more about that in terms of the live versus afterwards. I was listening to some people talk about the roast, some comedians talk about the roast, and they said, it is weird to do a roast live. Usually, what they would do is they will tape it, and then you just edit out everybody's set and just get the best jokes. So and that's why they were saying, again, I heard some behind the scenes of some of the writers, they were saying that's why the sports people who were on it didn't make fun of the comedians that much, because there wasn't time. Like, you just got to hit the jokes and go, because you got to keep it.
There wasn't time, and I think there wasn't inclination.
Yeah.
What is Hall of Fame wide receiver? I don't know if he's Hall of Fame. I think he is. What does Randy Moss know about Sam J, right? How would it make sense for him to spend any time, even time permitting, making fun of Andrew Schultz or other these incredible arena touring comedians? There's no connection there. Like, this is not what these guys do for entertainment. They don't spend hours watching comedy. They are, as to a man, on the football side of the dais, they were all still in very good shape, even if some of them haven't played for a while.
That's true.
So
that's true.
They focus on themselves.
We're not going to go through every single person who talked on it, but you just give me your thoughts on some of the people. What do you think of Kevin Hart as the host?
I felt like it was a little rocky at the beginning, and within minutes, all my concerns were allayed, appeased, dismissed. He did a phenomenal job. I thought he really, really, because it's not an easy job to do it. We've talked about Chris Rock's special, which was live, right?
Mm-hmm.
You come to rely on editing when you're doing a special. You come to rely on it, right? You say, oh, that didn't land. They'll fix it in post. They'll edit that out. And that is a source of comfort as a performer, right? Okay, that didn't work too much in the room. No big deal. The world won't see it. This is a whole different thing. Like, it's really different muscles at work. And I think Kevin Hart, being a guy who is an arena comic, but who also has his roots in, more intimate comedy venues, could do that balance between the large and the small. He's done enough stuff on television. He could work the camera. He's also suffered plenty of abuse himself, given his own height, self-abuse, abuse from others, mockery from others. It's an environment he was supremely comfortable in, and I'm not sure. I was trying to think about who else could have done this as well, and I don't really know. I thought he was just the best guy for the job, because he would also, as a host, you're keeping things moving, but he would also take time to address what had just happened and what had been said, and then put his arms on the podium and be like, you know what, guys, I got to say something about what just happened. He would make it intimate. He would make it big and make it small. It's a phenomenally difficult balancing act. I thought he did it masterfully. I don't know. What are your thoughts on Kevin Hart?
I agree, and you're right. People who haven't seen it yet, it does take place in an arena. It's huge. The audience there, and the floor is kind of like has tables for like the special celebrities and things like that. So yeah, you're right. I agree. I would say the only thing I didn't really like about him is sometimes he would and he's being very praiseful. Is that a word? He was praising a lot of the comics who were on, and he was saying, "Yo, that was so good." And he would kind of sometimes repeat their jokes that they made, which is fine, but after a while, it's like, okay, yeah, we know, we just heard the joke, so you can probably move on. And then we have Jeff Ross, the comedian, also called the Roastmaster General, the roaster of honor in this. He's been in a lot of these, and we could talk a bit about some controversy that came up in his set, but what do you think of Jeff Ross?
Jeff Ross is great, as always. He's, it's interesting. It really tells you a lot about this roast that he went on very early in the roast. The Roastmaster General is usually at the end. He's got the best jokes. He's the most gifted roaster. He will go at the end. But I think, putting him first made sense, because you just had this lineup of heavy hitters from the world of football and the world of entertainment. I don't know if I've ever seen this where there's guests who just sort of show up randomly, or they're in the audience, or you're like, what?
Yeah.
A surprise roaster who wasn't on the dais? Usually you're looking at the dais and you're like, okay, this is,
Who
again,
we expect.
dais?
Yeah,
Yeah,
exactly.
exactly.
Yeah, so
Yeah.
that was interesting. We'll get to some of those surprises later. I think it's because those people didn't want to sit on the stage for like 3 hours and then be made fun of. They
I
wanted to
think
come in and
physically
go.
there's not much space for them at that point. So it makes it look, but also, yes, I don't think they're like, I will roast, but I can't be roasted. My wife hasn't signed off on that. I don't need to have jokes about her mouth or whatever you guys are going to do. I don't need my whole life dragged into. You want to have me come in here and roast somebody, great, which is, that's an easy way to do it.
And well, interestingly, there were also a bunch of football players on the dais who didn't say anything. Like they were
Yeah.
just there in attendance. So that was an interesting choice. I don't know why they did that, but it was fine. So let's talk about the controversy with Jeff Ross since we're on the subject.
Yeah, controversy. I think people want it to be more of a controversy. It's a small thing overall.
Well, I mean, hold on. Like, so basically what happened is he made a joke about Robert Kraft, who's the principal owner of the Patriots, who was in attendance.
Who is in attendance and who also has been in hot water. There was, this massage scandal.
Right. He had this massage scandal. He went to like one of those kind of massage parlors, not a legit place.
I don't know what you're speaking about.
Yeah, exactly. And that was a couple years ago. That case was thrown out for various reasons.
Yeah, various reasons. Chief among them being that he has enough money to buy off everybody who is.
Yeah, I mean, legally it was because there was a legal collection of evidence because they were using video cameras in this establishment, and that's what they were using.
Yeah.
And the judge actually ordered those videos destroyed. So anyway, so he made a joke about this, and then Tom Brady gets up and whispers in his ear, but of course everybody's on a microphone, so you can hear, and he said, "Don't say that ish." He said that to
Ish.
Jeff Ross. Yeah. And at first when I saw that, I'm like, what? Tom Brady is the beginning of this roast. He's getting up and telling somebody not to say anything. This is the lamest thing ever. I thought it was so dumb. But then you find out actually what happened. There were rules that were set out ahead of time about what you could and could not make fun of. And actually the only rule, you correct me if I'm wrong from your reading, Ali, was that you couldn't make fun of Kraft.
I found that out after the fact too. I mean, I've heard conflicting things about the rules. Yeah, which is an interesting choice. Like, he didn't even say, don't make fun of my kids. Nikki Glaser said on her podcast, we decided that his kids were innocent victims, that we're not going to do that. We just decided as decent human beings, we're not going to. But otherwise, like, of all the people, Robert Kraft. I mean,
yeah, they made fun of their teammate, again, I forget his name, who committed suicide, who hanged himself. Yeah, so I mean, whatever. Okay, let's go through some of the other people that were on. There were a bunch of the football players. I don't think we have to go through them in detail. Two things I'll point out is Drew Bledsoe was very funny. Drew Bledsoe was basically the quarterback who was replaced by Tom Brady. I didn't know any of this. I found it out by watching the roast because I don't watch football, but I'm sure, Ali, you know about this story. And he was hilarious because he was super, like, his character was bitter and vindictive against Tom Brady, which was amazing.
Which is the right character, right?
Yeah.
Like, this guy had an incredible career ahead of him too. I mean, he's also All-American, phenomenal quarterback. And then this young guy comes and they go, sorry, Drew, I know we had promised you many things. I know you thought things were promised to you and due to you, but you're going to take a back seat while we play out this Tom Brady kid. And yeah, but Drew Bledsoe's career is kind of like, it was good. It's a good career, but there's also a lot of like what could have been, if Brady hadn't come along. So I thought that was good too. I was like, is he wasted? Is this going to get ugly? But it was
it was well done. The other football players, again, we could talk about them if you want. I mean, I think the main thing is like they made fun of Rob Gronkowski for being like stupid and like a Neanderthal, that was good humor.
Good humor, but Gronkowski, actually, I read an article recently about how good he is with his money, how much money he's been saving. It's actually my wife who showed me that article. Like, even men regarded as Neanderthals are better with their money than I am with mine. I think that was the message my wife was trying to deliver there. But apparently very, very savvy in certain ways, but they were definitely giving him the caveman character.
Yeah. I mean, I guess that's fair, though Tom Brady lost millions of dollars in like crypto investing. So anyway, the football players were fine. They were like Gronkowski, when he was on, he would like say clearly the jokes that were written for him, and then he would ad lib some, and he would point out, hey, I made that one up. I'm like, yeah, but the ones you're making up are like gay panic kind of jokes, like, just stuff that I'm like, I thought we were well beyond this for the past 20 years, but I guess in locker rooms, this stuff still happens. Like, you're gay, I'm gay. Like, come on, guys. Like, that was the lamest part for sure. And it wasn't just him of the whole thing. Like, guys, this isn't funny. Like, come on.
I totally agree. I felt that part was so dated, and it's just a reminder of like football culture.
Let's go on to something that was positive. In fact, the most positive thing of the night was Nikki Glaser. Nikki Glaser, let's just be honest, she was the performance of the night. She was the funniest person up there, and she has now made herself a huge star. It is quite clear this was like her breakout moment in comedy.
I think she's had a few. She's had a few breakout moments, but this was big. On this platform was massive.
I only actually know her from the roasts, and I'll tell you, I know her from another way, but I'll tell you that in a second. But I only know her from roasts, so you might be more familiar with her for other things.
I know her from roasts, and my buddy and yours, Q, was a big fan of her podcast.
Okay.
You Up?
Okay.
That's what the podcast is.
And so I'll give you a little hint. This is a connection to our podcast is 1 degree of separation away from the roast of Tom Brady. And it's because, do you know who wrote a bunch of jokes for Nikki Glaser?
Dan St. Germain, recent guest on this podcast, a guy who once did a roast of
Ric Flair, yeah.
And was the only guy who, as you said, followed the instructions, did the homework, did the assignment correctly, and then was made to feel bad because all you wrestling fans worship these wrestlers so much that you couldn't even make fun of them. And meanwhile, the one guy who did the roasting was made to feel awful.
So Dan knows how to write roast jokes, as you can see. He helped Nikki Glaser with this set. He actually mentioned that when he was on our podcast. He says, I do have a roast coming up, which I wrote for, that he wrote with Nikki Glaser, but he didn't say who it was for because he couldn't say it at the time.
Yeah.
And now he's able to say it. So I'm happy for Nikki Glaser. Happy for Dan. I think it's an
interesting part of the culture as well, right? Roast culture is like, you have these ghostwriters. It's known, it's not a big deal, it's understood. But yeah, you want to give those same jokes that you could have delivered as a terrific comedian. You want to give it to somebody who has a little bit of that, more cachet than you do, let's say.
It's an interesting thing. There's a bunch of writers on it. If you watch the end of the special, they list a bunch of writers. I don't think Dan was listed because he wrote specifically for Nikki, but there's people who they have writers. I don't know, they probably had like 15 to 20, and they all get together. They're writing jokes for all these different people. I don't know if they get paired up specifically or they write a group of jokes and people pick the best ones, but some people, I think, who...
Yeah, sure. Tyler Morrison is a terrific comic from Canada, from Ontario, and Tyler has been, the writer for a number of roasts. He does roasts of his own. I think of the roast of Ron Jeremy, he was on the dais, and he's been on part of roasts on the dais, and then he's also written for a lot of people, and he's very good at it.
Moving on with some more people who were roasters, we had Kim Kardashian, who was in the audience, then got up and did the roast and then went back and sat down. So she wasn't on the dais.
Yes.
The Kim Kardashian, I thought she was actually pretty funny. I thought her jokes were good. She delivered them well. The issue that came out was, I guess she was booed quite heavily in the arena. And then so everybody heard that live, and then subsequent airings, because Ali and I did not watch this live, they edited that out.
I mean, I could hear something significant. I didn't hear boos, but I definitely heard, like, it sounded like one drunk guy just yelling at the top of his lungs repeatedly something. And I was really trying to make it out. I actually rewound it to be like, because I'm no fan of Kim Kardashian by any means. I'm not fully, I don't understand her sort of value in society that's given her this pedestal. And I've tried to understand, and I don't. But I don't understand why so much ire and anger
why do you
would be directed at her.
It doesn't make sense. It doesn't make sense.
Especially at a roast where everything goes and you're turning off every part of you that finds things offensive when you're at a roast, but somehow her presence, makes you like heckle so loudly and repeatedly. I'd love for anybody who has any insight in that to let me know. I'm quite curious.
Moving on with other comedians, then there's Bert Kreischer, Tom Segura. I know Tom Segura is kind of a legend.
Segura. I might not know how to pronounce dais, but
there we go.
Segura.
Well, Bert Bert Kreischer, I don't know a lot about him. I know he's super popular. His podcast is super popular with Tom. I don't find him funny. I didn't think this whole set wasn't funny, but I don't know. What do you thought?
It was okay. It fell a little flat, especially after what Nikki Glaser did. I'm a fan of Tom Segura. Bert Kreischer, it's a very interesting comedy style. You know, it's like on the surface, very macho. He's often found shirtless and it looks like, testosterone charged, but he is 100% this emotional teddy bear. And the fact that people connect with that, I like that more than I like his comedy. I like the fact that his persona is something that people, I don't know, it feels like, hey, this is a good sign, right? Men more in touch with their emotions, more in touch with their emotional, their EQ, if you will. I like that Bert exists and that people like him, because there is this machismo and then also this softness going back and forth. But I haven't been able to get into it the way I thought I might. Definitely, good for him for being shirtless and, owning his body and not letting body shame get in the way of his career. Tom Segura, I think, is a terrific joke craftsman. I think his stories are terrific. His timing on his stories, his tightness. If you just, and I'm sort of a student of this kind of stuff too, and I present this to my students, just studying his rhythm and his storytelling style, and it's very, very strong. So I'm definitely a fan of his. Together, it was okay. It was okay. I wouldn't say it was a bomb. I wouldn't say it fell completely flat, but I don't think anybody's going home talking about how that was their favorite part of the night.
Then we have a couple of comics. I don't know a lot about these comics. You know some of them, Ali. So Sam J,
I know all of them,
was a
buddy.
writer. Okay, there you go.
Yeah.
Sam J was a writer on SNL for many years. Tony Hinchcliffe. I hope I'm saying that name properly.
Yeah, and in fact, we'll talk more about Tony in the coming months, I'm sure. Tony Hinchcliffe has a show called Kill Tony.
Yeah, podcast. Yeah.
Live from what's called the Mothership in Austin, that's co-owned by Joe Rogan, and it's helped turn Austin into this comedy destination. When you talk about comedy cities, you can't leave out Austin anymore. And this club is anyway, sells out, packed with people who come out to hear comedians come on stage and do 1 minute of comedy. And I think that's worth talking a little bit more about, including Tony Hinchcliffe himself as a human being and a character.
Okay, so maybe as a future episode. Anyway, yeah. I thought Sam J's set was funny, just very funny. Tony Hinchcliffe was merciless and really good. And then the other person, again, I don't know too much about him. I know you know about him, Andrew Schultz. He obviously he's now selling out arenas. Podcaster Andrew Schultz. Like, what do you think of Andrew?
I'm a big fan of Schultz. I met him many, many years ago when he was at the Comedy Works in Montreal. And so this rise has been meteoric, but also well-deserved. He's worked very, very hard for what he's done. He also surrounds himself with a great team of writers. He's very knowledgeable. He has some great jokes about, you see how much he knows about different cultures, and he establishes his knowledge. He teaches the audience something, and then goes in and rips that culture or that person apart. And it's a very interesting style. And it actually reminds me of Joe Rogan, in a time when George Bush was like, we gotta go into Iraq. We gotta bomb Iraq. You saw Joe Rogan would be on stage talking about Iran, Iraq, and telling jokes that were like culturally aware. And I was like, oh, this guy, first of all, he knows how to pronounce these countries, even though he looks like this pugilist and coming on stage, he doesn't look like, and he also has this thoughtfulness and this knowledge he comes with. And it just made me, appreciate that this is somebody who he's not like, what's with all these, like, people with these weird cloth on their head coming to this country. Mm-hmm. He wasn't like that at all. You might make an assumption that he might be a bit of a meathead on stage. Very thoughtful, very intelligent. So I think about that when I see Andrew Schultz. He's quite intelligent and, enjoying tons of success. Madison Square Garden recently, he sold out.
And then we come to a couple of surprises. I'll say one really good one. Well, we'll talk about it. So the really good one, Will Ferrell, but not appearing as Will Ferrell, appearing as Ron Burgundy from Anchorman. Ali, what do you think of this?
This is the problem, quote unquote, that Nikki Glaser set up. So tight and so merciless. Tony Hinchcliffe too, just pow, 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 like really roasting. Whereas Ron Burgundy, who I always love to see. I'm a big fan of Will Ferrell. It felt meandering, right? It felt like, he is handsome. He is very high. If you were up here, you would see how handsome he is. I like your skin. Got golden skin. It's like, hey, are we going somewhere with it? And that might have been what Will Ferrell planned to do the entire time, but it lacked a little bit of momentum for me because, the roasting is typically like very sharp. It's razor sharp, especially the good roasting. And so at some points I was like, has Will Ferrell forgotten his lines? And I feel like I shouldn't be thinking that. But otherwise,
Oh,
great to
interesting.
see him. And it worked very, the only way it would have worked more is if it was a roast in San Diego or if Tom Brady had been a San Diego Charger at some
Yeah.
point in his career. Then it would have really been like so perfect. But otherwise, it was great. What a terrific cameo.
Yeah, I agree with you. It was a bit different. It reminded me of the classic Norm Macdonald when you must remember which roast he did. I don't remember which one he
Every
did.
single time that guy was on, I mean, that guy is the best roaster imaginable.
Yeah, the energy of Norm Macdonald, that's what I was kind of getting at. Like he would do ones and he does like the kind of like the hacky comedy shtick.
Yes.
And the
yes.
really lame jokes, but that's the whole point of doing it.
That's
so
the
I
point
thought
of it,
that that's kind of what Burgundy was. Not really, because Norm Macdonald was the king of that. The last actor then, surprise person, was Ben Affleck. And what do you think of Ben Affleck?
Yeah, I mean, I wasn't 100% sure what he was doing, but obviously, him and Matt Damon, right? Notoriously Boston guys, probably grew up, fed the propaganda of being Pats fans from day one. Yeah, I thought it was all right. It was an interesting choice, and obviously retreated into the shadows as soon as he was done because he was like, please, I don't need any. This is not the roast of Ben Affleck. I'm getting the heck
That's
out of
right.
here.
Just like Batman, we retreated into the shadows. So that's basically it. Tom Brady gets up at the end and says his jokes. So those jokes were fine. They weren't like they were fine. They were funny and well written.
Well, you're actually leaving out one person that I feel like really
I did forget. Go ahead. Yeah.
Bill Belichick.
Yes.
Is that who you're talking
Bill
about?
Belichick and Kraft both came up, and then they had a big handshake and did a shot together to try to bury the hatchet, even though I'm sure it's not buried. But yeah, sorry, I forgot about that. So why don't you talk about those things?
Yeah, it's an interesting thing. And again, I'm not the football fan I once was. After Colin Kaepernick, I was done with the NFL completely, and I was already fading out of football to begin with. But, NFL insiders will tell you that there's a number of things where, Brady felt left high and dry. There was this Deflategate scandal with footballs, being intentionally deflated. And it felt like, to outsiders anyway, that his coach, Bill Belichick, and the owner, Robert Kraft, were not there to support him. They sort of left him out to dry there. And a number of times I think he felt it looked like he might have been abandoned. They were like, oh, Tom can handle this. So, from the outside looking in, there was a lot of, it seemed like there was strife and they were yelling at each other and they weren't getting along. And, if Bill Belichick wasn't there, a lot of people would have been like, yeah, of course Bill Belichick isn't there. It doesn't make sense. Why would he even be there? For him to be there was like a massive surprise. You saw the audience lost their mind.
Mm-hmm.
And his roasting was strong. And he also,
really
he did this nice balance of giving flowers. Well, at one point we see Rodney Harrison, who's on the dais, but one of those guys who never came up. And Belichick says the fact that Rodney Harrison isn't in the Pro Football Hall of Fame, that might be the biggest joke of the night, right? So not a roast. In fact, a real celebration of Rodney. Rodney was, obviously humbled to hear that from what would be, whether they got along or not. They recognize game. You know what I'm saying? These guys are surrounded by the best of the best. And yeah, Bill, I thought, was super strong. The biggest surprise out of everyone. Ron Burgundy was a pleasant surprise. This was a complete surprise to a lot of people. And I loved it also that Kevin Hart afterward was like, man, that was so good and so sweet that now I can't even go after you. I had jokes planned and it's just not going to work. Because this is what happens. I've been on shows where, as the MC, I gain the trust of the audience. They like me. They're going to go on a journey with me. And now I'm presenting them my quote unquote friends on the show. And then some comedian just does what they think they should do, which is come up and then make fun of the host. And it bombs because it's like, why are you making fun of a guy that we've just spent the last half hour getting to know and like? Now you look like the jerk. And Kevin Hart, very hyper aware of that. He's like, That was an amazing moment that Bill is here.
Right.
He was the big man. They buried it all. Mind your own business. You think you know things. You don't know anything. And now I can't go after Bill Belichick because I'm going to look like it. So that, again, that's like such an astute moment for somebody to have. Yeah.
So, these roasts have now moved from Comedy Central, which is what they were on initially, to now Netflix. I'm sure there will be more after this. It was a pretty big hit in terms of viewers and just being in the cultural conversation, right? A lot of people who didn't watch it initially are now watching it. We're talking about on the podcast.
The live element is like it's on steroids a bit. It's like, oh my God, what could go wrong? Anything could go wrong. I think that also adds to the stakes of it.
So how do you feel about that? You're excited about more roasts coming up in the future?
I've loved the roasts, even when we weren't in, there was a period of lots of roasts, right? In the 60s and 70s. Then there was no roasts, and then the roasts came back. In that no roast period, or that period where they were happening live but never filmed and never aired, I loved roasts even then. Just watching Sammy Davis Jr. and Don Rickles and Johnny Carson, all these guys, Milton Berle. I was like, these are men who would like have nothing to do with me, and they would be like, what's this, Pakistani Muslim doing? Like, I'm well aware that these guys would never be my friends, but appreciating it for what it was, this group of insiders ripping on each other, right? They were called the Friars. The
Club, yeah.
Friars Club roast.
Yeah.
I really enjoyed it. I thought it was a different type of comedy that it very much appealed to me. So I was very happy to see these roasts come back. The roasts are also a reminder to people that you sound like an absolute clown when you say things like you can't say anything anymore. Everything's going to be fine. People are saying lots of horrific stuff, and it's under the cover of comedy. And yeah, I'm a fan. I'll watch a lot of roasts, and sometimes I'll watch just for a few people, like Norm Macdonald, who you mentioned. When Norm is on, I'm interested. When Nikki Glaser is on, I'm interested. Anthony Jeselnik is another guy who really, really in his element in the roast culture. And yeah, I like it.
Okay, Ali, we're going to move on to our next subject. This is about kind of the, let's say, science and perhaps pseudoscience of Alex Guerrero, who is like the
Do you mean Dr. Alex Guerrero?
I do not.
No, you do not, because that was a term not earned by Alex Guerrero, but used by Alex Guerrero.
Right. So,
and then revoked.
Again, as Ali was implying, I don't know anything about sports or the NFL, so I was learning stuff watching this. And during the roast, they would keep cutting to people. So they would cut to Dana White and some people who I didn't know, but they were MMA fighters who fight.
Joel McHale.
Joel McHale, I saw. Hassan Minhaj. There wasn't a ton of celebrities that I recognized, but they kept cutting this guy, Alex Guerrero. And people kept making fun of Tom Brady and Alex Guerrero and like their business they have together and Tom Brady's restrictive diet. I'm like, who is this guy, Alex Guerrero? And they kept cutting to him. He's laughing and having just a great time. So I looked it up and I'm like, oh, I can see why people were making fun of this guy. So I thought it would make sense. So this is a bit different, this section. We're going to talk a bit about this guy, Guerrero, and then talk a bit about some of his claims.
Yeah, and just to add on top of what you just said, I think it's worth saying that the connection to Tom Brady could not be stronger. It literally could not. So he's defined as Tom Brady's body coach. He is also Tom Brady's business partner in this, T12 stuff that we're going to talk about. And he is the godfather of one of Tom Brady's sons. So these two are very, very much interlinked. Bill Belichick actually told a joke saying that a lot of people said, you and Tom butted heads, He goes, but it was difficult to butt heads with Tom because his head was so far up the ass of Alex Guerrero all the time. So it is, I think that's the prevailing sentiment. Others tried to do other jokes that didn't land as strongly as that. But it's like this guy is like a disciple and then went on to be sort of like almost a best friend and brother of Guerrero. So they are intertwined.
You'll see towards the end of Tom Brady's career with the Patriots, Bill Belichick, because a lot of the other football players on the Patriots were getting involved with this program that Alex Guerrero was doing. And it sounds like Belichick and the administrative staff did not like this. And there were some conflicts there because of some of the dubious claims of what was going on. So let's get into this guy, Ali. As you were saying, he is not a doctor. He received a master's degree in traditional Chinese medicine from Samra University of Oriental Medicine, which is in Los Angeles, California.
Which is actually no longer in
Exactly.
Los Angeles.
It was closed down due to some legislation type issues. He basically wrote a book in 2004 called Balance for Life, Understanding and Maximizing Your Body's pH Factor, which basically says going to take your diet and health to the next level, a 14-day diet plan. And he says in it that the principles that support this diet have been scientifically verified time and time again from researchers around the world. But again, it's ignored by conventional healthcare people. And he says even alternative healthcare practitioners ignore this. And so that's why it was so important to look at this pH factor and a proper acid-alkaline balance at the root of all disease conditions. So, Ali, have you heard anything about like these? Didn't know anything about this till I started looking up these alkaline diets.
So I'll tell you what, I actually have. Many years ago when I was borderline depressed and I was a salesman at a place called Future Shop, I was like, this can't be my life. Let me figure out. So I was reading, actually it was recommended to us, this guy, Brian Tracy. And Brian Tracy, to this day, had some real pearls of wisdom because, what you learn in sales is 90% of selling is your attitude. Sometimes you're buying an idea more than you're buying a product. You're buying the vibe that the salesman or the salesperson gave. Sometimes you're like, that a salesperson is being a little sneaky, but you smile and you go, all right, you did good. I'll buy this thing from you. And along with Brian Tracy was Tony Robbins, which I'm sure many people know Anthony Robbins is. And, one of his books also just about personal power and making the most of what you have with what you have and achieving all your dreams and so on and so forth. Did it work? Who knows? I'm pretty happy right now.
Well, there you go. Was it because of your
has been 25.
Yeah.
I don't know. So Tony Robbins in this one book, and I don't remember the name of it, but he had a chapter on diet. And I'll tell you the only reason that I gave it the time of day is because he wasn't selling anything. He was suggesting to have maximum energy. His whole thing is about energy. You cannot achieve things if you don't have the energy to be productive. So energy, he said, this is early days. He said alkaline. So he's explained that some foods, when they digest, there's an alkaline reaction in your stomach. Others, there's an acidic. And he said those two chemical compounds, there's an adverse reaction when they're both being activated at the same time in your stomach. So his thing was eat alkaline foods separately and eat the acidic food.
Okay, so that's a bit different. Yeah.
That's a bit different. Now, however, I went and looked it up. That's no longer talked about. Now it's try to maximize the amount of alkaline promoting food you have and keep 25% of your food acidic.
Yeah. So they say 20, they say 20%. So 80-20 is what a lot of people say. There's a different 80-20 diet, which is different, but what they're talking about is 80% alkaline, 20%.
Yes. And again, I have to say that with Tony Robbins, I'm more interested because he's not selling anything. I read the book in the library that Anthony Robbins, but he's just telling me how to maintain energy. I was like, okay, fine. I was very poor, but I was a very bad salesman.
Ali goes to libraries. Very impressive, Ali. You're learning.
Dude, I was 25 and I had no money for anything.
Well, no,
I love libraries. I love libraries. It's a great thing. However, the reason I bring that up is because the difference with Guerrero and with Tom Brady himself in his book, as I read the review of Tom Brady's book, it feels like a constant sales pitch.
Correct, yes.
Buy this, buy this, buy this is written throughout. So that's why this is worth investigating. In my mind.
So let's talk about this alkaline diet then. And is there any scientific evidence for it? So basically, we're talking about pH, right? pH is a measure of acid or what we call bases alkaline. So if something's basic, it's alkaline. So pH is acidic. I think we all kind of know that. So things that are acidic, like citrus fruits, they have citric acid, so they're acidic. Our stomach, right, secretes acid. That's how we dissolve.
The stomach has naturally occurring acid already.
Yes, exactly.
So you don't want to raise that too high. Is that right?
So you don't want to raise the acid level too high. So sometimes you get acid reflux or, that's how you can get some symptoms, some stomach symptoms, heartburn, But it's weird because as the pH level goes down, that's more acidic. And as it goes up, that's basic or alkaline. So it's weird when you're using the words up and down, but...
Okay, got it.
So basically, this alkaline diet says that eating certain foods can alter the pH of your body. Okay. And so what they have correct is that when we talk about metabolism in our body is basically chemical reactions, right? That's what we're doing. They said when you have a chemical reaction, it leaves behind ash, in quotation marks, in your body, which is a metabolic waste. Okay. That's not actually true, but let's go with that as a theory. So, and this waste can be acidic, neutral, or alkaline ash. And it's acidic ash can affect your body negatively. So you don't want to do that. You want to choose things that alkalize your body and improve your health. So alkaline things are fruits, nuts, legumes, vegetables. Neutral things would be like milk, starches, and some sugars. And acidic is like meat, poultry, fish, dairy, eggs, alcohol, and some grains. Okay?
Uh-oh.
And so what they say that basically if your body is too acidic, you will leach off minerals from your bones like calcium, because calcium is positively charged, so it would counteract the effects of acid. And so basically you'll get like osteoporosis if you don't do this. But it's actually shown that there's actually no link between dietary acid or alkaline foods and bone health. And in fact, a high protein, quote unquote, acid forming diet actually might be linked to better bone health due to increased calcium retention. So there's no evidence that it harms your bones having an acidic diet. And in fact, an acidic diet may be beneficial. There's also no link between an acid forming diet and cancer, because cancer cells can grow in alkaline environments and they can grow in acidic environments. So, you know, you can take these foods, like we said, a lot of them are vegetables, legumes, seeds, to alkalize your body if you want. But really, the reason why it probably works for people, at least for weight loss and for, you know, health, because we've talked about this many times, weight loss is one of the best things you can do for your overall health, but for your bones, for diabetes, for blood pressure, all the things we've talked about in the podcast before. Weight loss is a very good thing for these. And eating these whole foods, unprocessed foods, is good for you. And cutting out some of those things that probably are contributing to obesity is probably a good thing. So I don't think there's any magic thing about the alkaline diet. It's not because it's altering these chemical reactions in your body. It's because you're eating, in quotation marks, healthier, which is a fine thing to do. Maybe not as extreme as good old Tom Brady does, but, you know, he basically, he drinks 100 ounces of water a day. He says you should drink half your body weight in ounces. So if you're 200 pounds, you should drink 100 ounces of water a day. He avoids white flour, sugar, caffeine, dairy, salt, and the evil inflammation axis of evil. They call it this: peppers, mushrooms, and tomatoes. Maybe because they're acidic? I don't know. Ali, could you live without peppers, mushrooms, or tomatoes?
Not for long, buddy. Not for, I mean, of course I could, but is it a life worth living, bro?
Exactly. So listen, man, I gotta rant a bit more about Guerrero. So he was saying,
well, yeah, because we've talked about Alkaline, but there are a number of products.
Exactly. Okay.
Yeah. So I'm hoping you get to that.
Yeah. So he, in 2005, talked about this thing called Supreme Greens. It was a dietary supplement that, first of all, he claimed he was a doctor. Then he claimed that this could cure cancer, AIDS, multiple sclerosis, diabetes, arthritis. Thankfully, we talked about most of these on our podcast. We haven't talked about AIDS and HIV yet, so we should talk about that. So we've talked about that. And you know what, Ali? We never mentioned Supreme Greens as a treatment for any of those diseases.
Why not?
Because, well, again, the U.S. Federal Trade Commission sanctioned him for having these infomercials, falsely proclaiming this. And in fact, the worst part was, he said that his program helped 200 people diagnosed as terminally ill beforehand and then basically cured them. And then he, of course, admitted later, oh, you know what? Those people and those studies didn't exist. So,
which is
pretty upsetting.
I find it strange we live in a society where somebody has been a blatant liar. I mean, he's on television saying that he cured with Supreme Greens people with these advanced degenerative diseases. It's so bold, and then it's so blatantly a lie, and then he's in the inner circle of an NFL football team, which speaks to the NFL.
It speaks to, like, you know, Yeah, okay. Let me editorialize here. I think there's lots of people, and I'm going to specifically single out actors and sports players. I'm not using athletes, is what they're called.
Sports players, eh?
That's
Oh
how into
boy.
sports I am, who have achieved a lot of success and are super rich and are very valued by society. Whether you agree with that or not is irrelevant because they are valued by society. So I think they equate that honestly with, because I have all the success and wealth and stature, I am automatically a smart, intelligent person who knows everything about everything. And I'm like, you're not. And so I'm not saying there are not smart, intelligent athletes and actors and people, but those two things don't equate to each other. But I think you can start to believe your own hype. And this is, I think, part of the issue that comes in here. And the extreme example for this is the 6 Degree Nutrition, which was founded, again, by Guerrero, now in conjunction with Tom Brady, and they marketed a product called NeuroSafe. NeuroSafe, Ali, did you read? I sent Ali some articles. Did you read the tagline for NeuroSafe?
A seatbelt for your brain.
Whew.
Is that the one?
Yep. Supposed to protect its users from the consequences of sports-related traumatic brain injury. Listen, okay, so it says it dramatically improves recovery from head trauma by providing the brain with the nutrients it needs to repair itself. And then they have quotes from some NFL players and, of course, Tom Brady, how much it makes him feel more comfortable. If I get a concussion, I'll recover faster. Eventually, the FTC had to intervene again in 2012 and reached a settlement with Guerrero that made him close his company and stop marketing the product.
No more seatbelt?
No more seatbelt for the brain. And this is a serious thing. I mean, come on. We're talking Tom Brady's colleagues and the people who've come before him who've been diagnosed with concussions, who've been diagnosed with CTE, some of them implications that it caused them to commit suicide, you certainly have severe mental health and neurologic effects. You know, and we can do a whole episode on CTE and concussion in the future, maybe a couple episodes. So this is some serious stuff. And listen, you know, people don't have to be convinced about things that work. Why do I know this? Because of 3 drugs: Prozac, Viagra, and Ozempic. You don't need to advertise those ones, right? Ozempic there were shortages all across the country and North America this past year because of everybody using it. You don't have to convince people it works. They see the results. So if something really works and really protecting you from concussions, everybody would use it. Why wouldn't you want to do that? Protect your children from concussions, protect all these elite athletes. So I don't know. It's a bit sketchy, all the stuff that Guerrero has been involved in.
Bit sketchy, eh? And then, of course, the problem is here, and the challenge that somebody like yourself would be up against, Asif, is you look at who he's propped up by, who he's linked to, who he's working intimately with, and what their success is like on the field. That's your problem now. Now that's what you got to deal with.
I think, yeah. So let's talk a bit about this, because with Tom Brady, Guerrero started this TB12 kind of institute that it's really about the mind-body connection. It's beside, I believe, Patriot Stadium. And they focus on what's called prehab. So they do rehab as well, but prehab, getting your body in a position where you will prevent injuries. And they also talk about muscle pliability, which is not really a thing. If you ask personal trainers, it's basically not a thing. And though they're selling like vibrating foam rollers to help your pliability, and this gets into what you were talking before, Ali, about like, unfortunately, a lot of things in Tom Brady and Guerrero's books and in their programs is how can we sell the next thing to people, right? And you were talking a bit about that. This prehab thing it's interesting. Remember, this was started about 10 years ago or so, in like the early 2010s. And when you read about what they do, it's actually, so for example, they don't have any weights in their gym, no weights, right? So you don't do strength training in a non-functional way. It's all functional exercises. So you use box jumps, band walks, lots of resistant bands, planks, you know, these are functional strength exercises. Now, the interesting thing about this is that if you ask most personal trainers, That's where personal training has gone over the past 10 years or so, right? Functional training. That's why when you go to gyms, you see CrossFit, you see people doing box jumps, you see people doing ropes and resistance bands and all these things. It's not necessarily about weightlifting and bench pressing like it used to be. And so there's nothing necessarily wrong with that. I think it's important to know that Guerrero was alleged to be practicing physical therapy without a license, and he was sent a letter basically saying that he can't be supervising licensed therapists because he's not a therapist himself. So in other words, what I'm saying is I think there may be something here to what he's saying. And I sent you a Men's Journal article about a guy who was, I believe, a climber, like a mountain climber, I believe, who injured his calcaneus, which is like your heel bone, which is apparently a brutal injury to recover from. And sometimes people don't recover completely. And he went to this TB12 and he recovered really well, right? You read that one, Ali?
I did.
I don't know. What do you think of that?
I mean, I thought I wanted to ask you about that. Look, I imagine with any rehab, there are nutrients, these trace elements, various things that can benefit. Look, I've gone for physio for my shoulder, and there's there's exercises, but then there's also this, zapping, I would call it.
Yeah, TENS, which does work. Yeah. There's evidence for TENS.
Which does work, but you sit there thinking like, what is this? This is like somebody tickling my shoulder for 10 minutes. It doesn't feel like it's a thing, but it's science-backed. And yeah, so I definitely wanted to ask about this guy. But again, these are anecdotal, right?
Right. So this is exactly it. So I do think some of the stuff that's going on in general in TB12 does probably make sense, and it goes in line with what personal training is doing these days and physiotherapy is doing. But I think the issue comes with what you were saying, Ali. Like, all these elite athletes are seeing him. And let's just take Tom Brady for an example. It's quite possible that Tom Brady, if he wasn't doing this, would not have been playing football into his early 40s. He wouldn't have won all the Super Bowls, and he would have injured himself and flamed out. That's one theory. Or it's that the opposite extreme is Tom Brady is a genetic miracle, and it does not matter what he did. He could be sitting around eating McDonald's every day, and he would still be the best quarterback, say, in history. Right? As many people say, the GOAT, as people say. Or maybe it's somewhere in the middle. For Tom Brady's personal physique and his biological makeup, this type of stuff, and let's just say the physical exercises he's doing, is appropriate for him. I don't think there's any evidence for all the other stuff in terms of the nutrition and the supplements. I mean, Ali, he was marketing recovery pajamas that you wear at nighttime and they help you with your muscle recovery. Come on, guys. Let's be honest here. So the concern, I guess, is that people are, as you said, applying an anecdote about arguably the greatest quarterback who's ever lived, and trying to apply it to everybody. And if I do this, I'll be as good as him and I'll recover as fast as Tom Brady. I don't know if you can do that. Again, it may work for an individual, but now if you want to say it applies to everyone, I think that's the hard part. Plus, even if you have some parts of a program that make sense, right? And they may make sense from a fitness, a personal training, physiotherapy point of view. Does it apply to every single thing you're talking about with the diet and the supplements and the pajamas and the NeuroSafe and all this stuff? It probably doesn't, but you're confusing it all together. And I think, Tom Brady's, saying he's bought the Kool-Aid and drinks the Kool-Aid is an understatement. He is not just drinking it, he's manufacturing the Kool-Aid and insisting his buddies, insisting his buddies, take a bath in it. So he's fully entrenched in this. And again, that's fine for him. But the real question is, does this apply to everyone? I don't think, outside from maybe some of the personal training stuff, which I don't know enough about. As you guys know, I'm not a personal trainer. Maybe there's something there, but for the other stuff, I'm not sure.
Not sure, eh? Well, this is the problem then, Asif, because it's theories in both directions, right? The theory is this works, but then the counter theory is but maybe it doesn't. Maybe it's just because of A, B, or C, right? His genetics, his this, his that. So we don't have any concrete answers. Which is why I just, as you were talking, ordered a pair of recovery pajamas online.
Oh, boy.
I didn't, but I'm excited to look.
You're not
that up
really.
and see what's-
You're gonna,
I'm
no, you're not
do
going to.
that.
So, yeah.
I have nothing to
But
recover
that's the
from.
thing,
Life.
and this is what Ali and I talk about in this podcast all the time. It comes down to what does the science back? Because everybody could be individual. You know, you could have a certain reaction to a certain food that makes you feel bad. That's fine. But are you to say eliminate that food for every single person? Well, you can't say that necessarily. So that's all we're saying. So again, maybe it's applicable to one person, but can medicine advocate a lot of these practices that are promoted by Guerrero, Tom Brady, TB12, whatever? I don't think so. Okay, that's our episode for today. Let us know what you guys thought. A pretty heated discussion in both topics. Heated discussion with regards to the roast of Tom Brady. I think Ali and I both liked it. And of course, a very heated discussion on my part with Alex Guerrero and some of the practices that him and Tom Brady are involved with. I think slightly questionable.
Quackery, huh? You think it's quackery?
I do. Let us know
Quack,
what you guys think. Do you guys agree with that? drvcomedian@gmail.com, drvcomedian on Twitter, Facebook, Instagram. We are everywhere. Very interested to hear what you guys thought about this. Happy to discuss other things. Again, we had some of the topics with regards to the roast and a lot of topics that came up in our discussion of Tom Brady and Alex Guerrero, specifically things regarding like CTE, concussion. I think there's lots of stuff. And of course, there's lots of other alternative medicine that I'm happy to discuss the scientific evidence for. Ali was asking me offline about Chinese medicine. You know, is there scientific evidence for that? We can talk about that in the future as well. If you guys like, let us know. Ali, anything you got going on towards the end of May, beginning of June?
I would say standupali.com is my website.
I would say that
encourage
too.
you to go there. Yes, I would agree with what you just said about what I just said. And check it out, and I'll have some things posted. Big show in Toronto, a comedy special recording in September. And so I'll be doing a fair amount of comedy throughout the summer.
Awesome. We are looking forward to that. But remember that although I'm a doctor, again, unlike Alex Guerrero, I'm not your doctor. Medical issues we talk about are for your interest and information only, and they're not medical advice. Please consult your medical professionals for actual medical advice. Thanks for listening.
Bye.